Welcome to this first consultation session. We're very excited to begin this new phase of work with both of your universities and to learn more about the ways in which you plan to incorporate core practices of leading discussion into your teacher education programs. Caroline, are you sharing there we go, to the next slide. So we wanted to begin by quickly having introductions to the people from your team who will be working on this project as the team leads. So we'd love to hear, again, your name and institution, and in what course you'll be implementing the core practice around discussion. So I will let Churchai maybe coordinate the introductions.
Thank you, Professor Pam. So our first session will be the introduction. So let's hear from Phuket Ratchapat University team ครับท่านอาจารย์สิริวัลย์ครับผมขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญครับ
Good morning. Good morning for all. Yes, thank you so much for the times that you contribute for us for consultation. So our teams for today's, actually I will have more people come and join with us later. So myself, Siriwan Chatmani Lunjalern, I'm a Dean Faculty of Education. And I think now we have Porntip. So she is a second instructor that will use the core teaching practice. So for the courses that we will use the core teaching practice integrate with our lesson designs, we have like 5 classes that we plan to use the core teaching practice. First is measurements and evaluation in teaching and learning science. Second is integrated learning management for science teachers. And we have the third class is chemistry learning management. So all these 3, we will continue with practicum 1 and 2. So there are total 5 classes that we will use core teaching practice during working with a student teacher for Phuket Ratchapat University. Actually, last semester, we try out to bring all the activity for core teaching practice and use with our activity that we conduct with our classes. So it's kind of like next step is we will do enrichment programs based on core teaching practice and continue follow up with student teachers at the school during the internship. So that is about Phuket Ratchapat University. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So next, let's hear from Thaksin University ครับขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญท่านอาจารย์สิงหาครับผมครับ
Good morning, everyone. And good evening, Dr. Pam and team. I prepared the slide from discussion. I will introduce for the information from Thaksin University briefly from my slide. Let me share slide. Yes. Okay. This here is my team for working in this core practice project. This my team consists of me, Dr. Singha Pasipong, and our team. Let me our team introduce yourself.
Say me first. Hello, everyone.
Start with Ajahn Thanika.
Okay, hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all today. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Thanika Wasinyanuwat. So my major in science education, my specialty or my major is about biology. Thank you.
And
Next.
next อาจารย์สุวรรณี
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Hello, everybody. My name Suwani Plianram. I'm lecturer in mathematics education. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name Kasem Pembayun. I major mathematics education. Nice to meet you.
Okay. And the last one, Dr. Thanika, and Dr. Tantanok, she is the beauty today. And then for this this project, we will apply with our student is Master of Education program. We teach the science and mathematics education course for the first year and second year students. Our students, they got the bachelor degree in science and mathematics. And we will apply the core practice in our course of science and mathematics teaching space creation. This course is implemented with the first year student in second semester 2024 academic year. And our goal of this course, we try to develop student competency of learning management in science and mathematics. For example, analyze the classroom, design the learning management, teaching practice, and reflect or improve the learning management. And we hope that the core teaching practice will support that goal, in particularly in the part of analyzing the learner responses, feedback, and learning management. That is our short information. Thank you.
Thank you. After our initial presentation, we will be breaking into two groups, one for each university, and we'll have time to go deeper into what you're planning to do. But again, we're hoping that you learn what other universities are tackling as well. So it's helpful for everyone to hear the introductions and the courses that we'll be targeting. So Caroline, can we move to the... So we wanted to begin by, again, reminding everyone of the expectations for our work together. Caroline, I think we can see your whole screen right now. Here we go. That as we've said before, that we'll work with you to help plan out a unit for the teaching of discussion in your classes across the 6 different universities. And this work will happen in the spring. So we're planning our second planning meeting for May, and we're setting those dates up now. We're then hoping you can implement the unit on the teaching of discussion in the summer and fall of this year. As you heard from Churchai, we'll be visiting in late July, early August. And at that point, we hope that you will have tried some of this out so we can talk about how it's going. If possible, observe your teacher education classrooms and continue to learn together about this work. And then in the fall, the hope is that you can use what you've learned to revise those units in consultation with your peers and our team, and then support other teacher educators at your university to also begin to implement units on core practices. So we, again, just wanted to make sure that all those expectations are clear. Caroline? We then thought we would quickly review and revisit examples of what the units on classroom discussion look like in two of our teacher education programs, so that you can see again what our goal is. And I'll turn it now over to Tess.
Wonderful. So to get us started thinking about what these units might look like in a teacher education course, before we get into thinking about how we design our courses or our syllabi, we wanted to take a moment to focus our attention on the focal core practice that we'll be working on in our time together. So it's our goal to help you all prepare teacher candidates that can facilitate discussions with K-12 students. But what exactly do we mean when we say we want teachers to work on the practice of facilitating a discussion? We want to say that we don't mean any old classroom talk. It's really typical, as you see on the left hand of the screen, that students talking in classrooms only consists of really short student responses to teacher questions, maybe just a yes or a no or one word. Often in classrooms, we see teachers doing a lot of the talking, and many times they're doing a lot of the intellectual work. They're solving the problems for students, or explaining the science to the students if you're in a science classroom. They're doing that heavy load, the heavy thinking. And last, the discourse or the talk often assesses what students already know, and doesn't give them space to figure out anything new. So that's the typical, and we want to push our teacher candidates to move away from that towards what we see on the right hand of the screen, which is what's possible. So we know that more is possible, and that research on how students learn tells us that more discussion-rich instruction leads to stronger and more memorable learning outcomes for students. So when we say that our goal is to prepare students to facilitate discussions, we want to support teachers to attempt to make talk in classrooms something that's exploratory and dialogic, going back and forth, not just those one-word answers. Second, that students take on more of the intellectual work. They're not just hoping the teacher will think for them, they're thinking alongside their teachers. And last, that talk is used to explore and deepen students' understanding of the content that's being learned. So we know that's possible. Moving to the next slide, however, we want to note that having these kind of dynamic back and forths with students don't just magically happen. Discussion doesn't just happen if you ask students to talk. It requires really skilled and practiced facilitation on the part of the teacher. So our job as teacher educators in the university is to actually show teacher candidates what we hope classroom discussions will look and sound like, give them a vision of what this talk can be like. So here we're going to play a brief clip of what we think is a strong classroom discussion happening in a Thai classroom. And this is something you might use as a representation to illustrate a high quality discussion to teacher candidates. So let's take a look, and as you watch, really listen for the ways that the teacher is helping to facilitate a deeper and more exploratory conversation. So Caroline's going to hit play. Oh, one thing before we hit play, you'll see the math problem being discussed is in Thai on the screen. I believe there are 5 hexagon-shaped tables, and they want to know how many chairs can sit if we put all of those hexagons together. So that's the context of the video. It should last about 3.5 minutes. So enjoy.
I hope this works.
ใครต้องการออกมานำเสนอแนวคิดคะรู้สึกว่าจะคิดได้เหมือนกันคล้ายๆกันเลยจ้าเชิญเลยค่ะค่ะเขียนเลยน้ำเงินเขียนตัวโตลงในนี้เลยค่ะ ทีนี้จ้าจ้าลองอธิบายแนวคิดให้เพื่อนฟังสิคะว่าจ้าจ้าคิดยังไงคะ
ของหนูใช้วิธีการคูณค่ะ5ก็คือจำนวนโต๊ะค่ะส่วน6ก็คือจำนวนคนนั่งต่อโต๊ะค่ะแล้วก็เอามาคูณกันค่ะก็จะได้เท่ากับ30ค่ะ
ปรบมือให้เพื่อนหน่อยค่ะมีใครคิดต่างจากนี้มีไหมคะถ้าเกิดเราไม่ใช้วิธีการคูณก็คือเพื่อนบอกว่า5คืออะไรนะคะจำนวนโต๊ะ5คืออันนี้คือจำนวนโต๊ะแล้ว6คืออะไรนะคะจำนวนอะไรนะคะจำนวนคนที่นั่งต่อ1โต๊ะต่อโต๊ะมองเห็นไหมคะดูนะคะแล้วมีวิธีอื่นในการหาคำตอบนี้ไหมคะนักเรียนว่ามีวิธีอื่นอีกไหมคะแบบไหนคะยังไงนะคะ6 บวกกัน5ตัวเพื่อนบอกว่าเอา6 5ครบหรือยังคะได้เท่ากับเท่าไหร่ลูก34เพื่อนบอกว่าสามารถหาได้2วิธีก็คือเอา5คูณ6เท่ากับ30และอีกวิธีหนึ่งก็คืออะไรคะ6 บวกกัน5ครั้งก็เท่ากับแล้ว2แนวคิดนี้มันมีความสัมพันธ์กันยังไงคะสามารถเชื่อมโยงกันได้อย่างไรตอบดังๆค่ะ
การบวกซ้ำๆกันนะคะมันก็เปรียบเทียบได้กับการคูณนะคะ
การบวกซ้ำๆกันก็เปรียบเทียบได้กับการคูณและยังไงต่อครับใครที่จะเติมเต็มจ้าจ้าได้อีกความหมายมันยังคงเหมือนเดิมไหมคะเหมือนเดิมยังไงลูก
ความหมายคงเหมือนเดิมคือ6 บวกกัน5ครั้งคือจำนวนคนที่นั่งต่อโต๊ะ6 คนบวกกับจำนวนโต๊ะ5ครั้ง
6ตัวนี้คืออะไรนะ
จำนวนคนที่นั่ง
จำนวนคนที่นั่งต่อโต๊ะแล้วยังไงอีกคะ
แล้ว6ทั้ง5ตัวนั้นก็คือจำนวนโต๊ะทั้งหมดที่มีครับ
เพื่อนบอกว่าแล้วก็5ตัวคืออะไรคะ
จำนวนโต๊ะที่มี
อันนี้คือคุณครูขอวงแบบนี้นะคะอันนี้คือจำนวนโต๊ะดังนั้นถ้าเกิดนั่งแบบนี้ถ้าเกิดคุณครูต้องการหาคนจัดโต๊ะแบบนี้10ตัวจะมีคนนั่งทั้งหมดกี่คนคะ
60
เท่าไหร่คะ
10 คน
Great. So as Tess said, it's very important to show our students examples of what this discussion looks like, but it's also important to design opportunities for our teacher candidates to practice the elements of that discussion facilitation as an actual activity during our teacher education courses. And that's one of the things we are going to be working with you to help you develop. So hopefully you noticed in that discussion that the teacher asked 2 students to share their solutions. She was eliciting their solutions to the problem. She was also asking clarifying questions about their solutions and asking probing questions to help them make sense of those solutions. Additionally, she was asking students to make sense of each other's solutions, not just their own way of solving the problem, but making sense of other students' ways of solving the problems. And importantly, she was asking students to make connections between the strategies. So within that one discussion, there were a lot of subcomponents and a lot of component practices that the teacher was using. And though it's very important that we help our students understand not just the big practice of discussion, but those component practices that make up a high leverage discussion. And I'll pass it back to Tess.
Wonderful. Thanks, Caroline. So now that we've been reminded of our goal of working with teachers to facilitate discussions as the core practice we're focusing on, we're going to think through together how we can use 3 different pedagogies in our teacher education courses to work on discussion facilitation. So those 3 pedagogies are representations, decomposition, and approximation, and we'll focus on those 3 specifically tonight. So to add representation to a course is to give teacher candidates opportunities to see, hence the eyeball symbol there, high quality examples of discussion. So in our teacher education courses, we often rely on video, like we just watched, of skilled teachers conducting dynamic classroom discussions. To either supplement video, or if sometimes a good video isn't available of the teaching practice we want to work on, sometimes we as teacher educators can do a model discussion or a model lesson to show the practice that we're looking at and allow our teacher candidates to experience that practice as learners. So those are both examples of seeing or representing a teaching practice. To decompose is to do what Caroline just did. So as that list is showing, it's breaking down a bigger, complicated practice into smaller component pieces. So when we think about decomposing discussion facilitation, we think about breaking discussion into different teacher talk moves, for example. So this could sound like defining the talk move of pressing a student to elaborate on their thinking, or alternately asking a student to revoice a classmate's thinking as another possible component move or component practice to that larger practice of discussion. Once we have this kind of shared smaller list of components, we can conduct an analysis of the video representation we may have just watched to identify these smaller pieces we can work on. And that's all part of that decomposition in the middle. Lastly, we want to push our student teachers not just to watch, not just to analyze discussions, but to actually try out discussion facilitation for themselves. So this is where the approximation comes in, which again is just trying it out for yourself. So when focusing on the practice of this discussion, this might look like having our teacher candidates rehearse the role of discussion leader in a lower stakes environment where their peers or classmates in the university are playing students while they practice facilitating a discussion. In our courses, we often set up small groups of teacher candidates to rehearse discussions together in these sort of lower stakes environments where it's easier to maybe pause teaching and give feedback, or try something over again in a way that you don't normally get to do when real students are in front of you in a K-12 classroom. So these are the 3 kind of pieces of the framework we'll think about with you all tonight in relation to your courses and thinking about how to integrate discussion facilitation in your courses. So with that, I'll pass it over to Pam, who will show you an example of how she uses these practices in her English language arts methods class.
So we wanted to dive into 2 examples, one from a secondary English language arts methods class and another from an elementary math class. We've shared this syllabi before, where we call out the practices that we will be working on in the context of the class. And you'll notice at the bottom of that list is facilitating whole class discussion. So again, when you're focusing on a core practice, it's important to tell the students the practices that they'll be learning, to make sure that you actually teach them and engage them in those phases of representation, decomposition, and approximation, and create those practice opportunities. So next slide. We'll look now at how I did this in the context of my class. So Caroline, go ahead and put all of those there. In introducing the practice, we often give readings for students to understand why discussion is important, how it helps students learn so that they understand why they're engaging in the process. One of the first things I do is to lead a model discussion around a shared piece of literature as an example or a representation of the practice. And then after the discussion, I ask them to put on their hat as teacher and analyze what worked and didn't work about the discussion, what it was that I did to try to facilitate the discussion, and how that affected their own participation. An example of representation and decomposition. We then engage in watching videotapes by an experienced teacher leading discussion. And this material that I have allows multiple examples of the teacher leading a discussion, as well as some of the materials that she used in her class. And I ask students to answer one set of questions. So this is the decomposition, where they look carefully, for example, at how the teacher sets norms for discussion, or monitors participation during discussion. We then ask them to identify one of these components to try out while leading a small group discussion in our teacher education classroom. And they then lead that discussion in class, followed by feedback from their peers. So as you can see, we spend a lot of time helping them understand what a good discussion looks like, what the components are, and then having them both analyze the practice and then try it out. Caroline, next slide. The next slide. So based on the video materials, these are the kinds of questions that they analyze. And I often have them do this in small groups, so they learn from one another. So for example, what norms does Yvonne establish for discussion? How does she reinforce them throughout the class period? And then they're asked to give examples from the video. And when they lead the discussion with their peers, they'll show those examples. Another thing, component of practice is monitoring participation. So I ask them, how does she monitor? Pay attention to who speaks and for how long. And what does she do to encourage everyone's participation? So this is the decomposition component. Next slide. Then their first approximation is in class. You can see a much younger version of me there. This is when I was teaching at Stanford University. And here we're in a small group, and one of my students will lead a discussion about one component of the teacher's practice. So Caroline, do you want to push play and we'll watch a little bit?
Hey, Tiffany! And my focus question was the last one on your sheets. What does Yvonne do early in the school year to prepare the students for text-based discussions? And I was to focus my attention on video number 3. And there was so much that she did. So much that she did. I highly advise all of you to take a look at video number 3. And Travis hit on a little bit of what I wanted to start out with, but I wanted to have everybody take a look at what she does when she talks about metacognitive markers.
So video number 3 and what?
Video number 3 at around 0058. And as she's explaining this, I want us to kind of think about if this is something that we would consider doing in our classrooms with our students, maybe even for the discussions that we have coming up in the next couple of weeks. I want us to think about that and how, well, we already talked about that, how we interact with our texts. So how do we expect our students to interact with text based on?
So here you see her setting up the discussion, posing the questions for the small group discussion. You can see she's not expert at it. the questions get lost. She repeats some. She'll have to go back and reorient the students later on. But here's her first effort to, again, use questions and elicit student responses to this video. Following, notice that this is doing two pieces of work. They're learning about the discussion and this component of discussion, and they're learning to lead a discussion. When she finishes, she'll get feedback from the teacher educator, me in this case, and her peers about what she did well and what could use improvement. The next part of the assignment is for them to actually choose a strategy to try out in their own student teaching classroom. They have to share it with us ahead of time and why it's important and what they hope students will learn from it, and to talk with their cooperating teacher. So they prepare to lead to a discussion and try out a particular strategy. So this is a second approximation of practice, another attempt to try it out. And so here you'll see another student from the same class setting norms in her student teaching classroom. They are required to videotape themselves as they lead this discussion, and then they bring this videotape back to our class so that they can share it with their peers and also get feedback, both from the teacher educator and their peers. So let's just watch a little bit of Lily setting norms.
It's okay to have silence in discussions. I know you guys, a lot of time you're thinking or you're looking for evidence or you're trying to figure out how exactly you're going to put something into words. And so silence is okay. I don't want you guys to feel uncomfortable just because nobody's talking in the room. But the important thing is that you're also thinking during silences and not just waiting for someone else to do the talking. Sorry. Say. I know some of you are really uncomfortable with talking in groups, and that's okay. And a lot of you have made an effort since the beginning of the year to talk a little bit more, and that's really great. So if you can talk, we'd love you to contribute whatever ideas you have, even if it's just reading off your own paper, that's okay. And we're here to assess what you learn, and if you don't say anything, we don't know if you understand the story or not. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask, because that's how everyone else learns too, and I'm sure a lot of people have the same questions.
Caroline?
So before we start, I'd like you to look at number.
So again, you see her trying out the strategy of setting norms before she leads the discussion. Again, she's not expert at it. She talks a lot, but this is the first time that she's tried to do this, to establish the norms prior to the discussion. And again, the last part of the assignment was to reflect on her effort to do this, what she learned from it, and what she might do in the future. So that is, again, as you can see, it's a full unit that engages in both multiple representations, decompositions, and at least 2 opportunities to try out these components of leading a discussion. Caroline?
Verse 1 through 7.
Let me turn it over to you.
Every time I click on something on my computer, it makes the video go or stop. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm now going to talk about a similar unit that I've done in my elementary math methods course. And fortunately, I don't have any videos to share here. But again, just like Pam said, in my syllabus, I clearly lay out that core practices are a central part of the course. That's not the only part of my course. We also focus on learning the content and learning the research on student learning and learning pedagogical practices. But learning to actually do the core practices is an important part of the course. And you can see I've listed 8 core practices that are recommended as research-based effective practices by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics in the US. And you can see there that facilitating meaningful mathematical discourse and posing purposeful questions are some of those practices. So we start the unit on discussion in the course with representation and then move on to decomposition. So first, I have my students participate in mathematical discussion as learners, where I am facilitating that discussion. And they are actually learning the mathematics because learning content is an important part of the course. But then they can reflect on the experience and think about what I did to facilitate their learning and to facilitate the discussion. So that's the first representation. I then have them watch a video of a mathematical discussion in an elementary or K-12 classroom and analyze the teacher's practice to identify specific moves that she is making in the classroom to facilitate discussion. Again, this is the representation and moving towards the decomposition. I also have them read a transcript of a mathematical discussion in a K-12 discussion. And because in mathematics, what the teacher writes on the board is an important part of the discussion, as you probably saw in the video we shared, I have them practice that, actually practice representing on the board. And then throughout the course, they are also doing readings on discussion and talk moves to help support their understanding of these practices. So to go a little bit deeper into the assignments, for this first assignment, I give students specific questions to answer when they're watching the video of the teacher leading discussions. So again, this helps them decompose into the component parts of leading a discussion. Things like maintaining norms, eliciting student thinking, representing student thinking, the questions the teacher asks, and the ways that the teacher connects the discussion to the mathematical goals. And if you were in any of our previous workshops, we had participants actually do this activity after watching some videos of mathematics discussion. The second assignment that I described involves looking at a transcript, as I said, from a discussion without the video. And so in this case, the teacher is eliciting an explanation from a student, and the students read that and then practice how they would represent that student's strategy on the board. And here on the slide, you can see two different ways that students thought about representing one strategy for adding two numbers up, 119 plus 126. They're both good ways to represent, but then we can have a discussion in class about what each representation offers and why you might want to use one representation over the other. In this way, we're slowing down this practice of representing student thinking because it's a hard practice to do in the moment. And teachers need to have opportunities to actually practice it and get better at it. And then finally, once they've developed some of these skills and really thought about it, we have them engage in approximation of the practice by doing rehearsals in small groups over a couple of several class sessions. And in the rehearsals, in the small group, one group member will act as the teacher, and the other students will act as students. I actually do give them scripts to follow as students so that they can give responses that real elementary students might give, not what adults would give. And in this way, we focus on the work of teaching. This is not for evaluation. It's really for them to practice and to get feedback and to think deeply about the work of facilitating discussion. We often pause during these rehearsals to give feedback or to discuss different alternative moves that the teacher could make. And then at the end, we reflect together on the challenges and the strengths of the facilitation that we saw. And then finally, as a final assignment, my students have to video record their own facilitation of number talks in the classroom. My students are in a fieldwork classroom while they're taking my methods course. So they videotape themselves with K-12 students and submit those videos for feedback, both for feedback from me and for feedback from each other, for peer feedback. And then at the end of the semester, they reflect on their own strengths and identify areas where they want to continue growing. If my students were not in a classroom while they were taking this course, I would still have them do this kind of reflection and analysis around the rehearsals that they were doing in class. Okay,